Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we are going to talk about the role of neuroplasticity in so what is the role of neuroplasticity? So the activation, the neuroplasticity in specifically to the maternal brain. The activation of neuroplasticity is essential in early life factors, for example, as the experience of a parental warmth. The activation of neuroplasticity is a factor in brain circuits that ultimately regulates maternal affection, for example, mood-related regulation and outcomes of the caregiving of the mother. So this is a diagram which illustrates the neural and psychological mechanism of maternal attachment and adaptation. So about the plasticity in the maternal brain. It shows how different brain regions interact with to regulate maternal emotions, empathy, and long-term caregiving outcome. So the mother own experience of maternal warmth, which is in the yellow box. So you see mother own experience of the maternal warmth shapes her own maternal behaviors. So these experiences influence the prefrontal cortex, PFC, and anterior cingulate cortex, which is ACC. So we can see PCC and ACC, which regulates emotional and cognitive control. So the neural structure which are involved here are dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, DLPFC, which is a dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. In this blue area, it supports the executive function and empathy and helps regulate the response to emotional stimuli. This other blue area, which is the ventral lateral prefrontal cortex or VLPFC, it is involved in emotions which regulate for regulation of the inhibition of the stress responses. The ACC area, which is dorsal and ventral dorsal anterior cingulate and the ventral anterior cingulate plays a key role in emotion regulation, decision making, and social bonding. The other area, in the red area, amygdala, insula, and ventral striatum. So the amygdala, insula, and ventral striatum, which is the VS in red, is key region, or these are the key region for salience, fear processing, and reward responses in a person. The amygdala detects emotional relevant stimuli. The insula process bodily sensation, and the ventral striatum or VS is associated with the motivation and the reward. So all three areas they are active. So the oxytocin hormone, which is in the green at the bottom, is the critical bonding hormone that enhances the maternal attachment. It modulates the activity in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, promoting empathy and positive social behaviors. So we also have the psychological and the behavioral outcomes. So the prefrontal, the pre-parenthood affective borders, which is the red box, pre-parenthood affective disorders, past emotional or psychological disorders, so which happened in the past of a person, of a mother. So any emotional disorder in the past or psychological disorder in the past, for example, anxiety, depression, can dysregulate these neural circuits. So these neural circuits can be affected, and they can be dysregulate. These behavior will affect and cause dysregulation of the circuits. This can lead to difficulty in emotions regulation and maternal bonding. So the maternal bonding and the emotional regulation will have a difficulty in these patients. So the mother-infant adaptive attachment, which is the yellow on the top, mother-infant and adaptive attachment box, is a well-regulated maternal brain circuit which supports secure attachment between mother and infant. It leads to the healthy emotional and cognitive development in the children. the this one, mother-infant adaptive attachment. And then we have long-term maternal adaptation and child outcomes, which is the blue, right? Long-term maternal adaptation and child outcomes. It's a positive maternal experiences contribute to resilient children with strong emotional regulation and social skills. The postpartum maladaptation and psychopathology, which is the bottom red area here. It causes dysregulation of the maternal brain network, which can lead to postpartum depression, anxiety, maladaptive caregiving behaviors in the patients. It disrupts the maternal bonding and long-term child outcomes. So the key takeaways from this circuit we can pick are the prefrontal cortex and ACC. It regulates maternal emotions and empathy. The amygdala and the reward circuits drive fear, salience, and motivation for caregiving. The oxytocin hormone plays a critical role in strengthening maternal bonding and reducing stress responses. Mother's past emotional experiences influence her ability to bond and be a good parent. A healthy maternal adaptation leads to positive child development, while maladaptive response can contribute to postpartum psychopathology. The application of this circuit model helps in understanding the postpartum depression and maternal mental health. It emphasizes the importance of early intervention in these therapy and social support for new mothers. It supports research on oxytocin-based treatment for maternal stress disorders. So this diagram effectively integrates neuroscience, psychology, and maternal behavior, and also highlighting the importance of maternal mental health in shaping child development during early life. So this is another diagram where we can see which illustrates the neural circuitry involving the fear regulation and emotional processing. It highlights the interaction between the prefrontal cortex, PFC, anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and hippocampus, amygdala, and insula. So we have all these area of the brain: ACC, anterior cingulate cortex, prefrontal cortex, PFC, ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, amygdala, insula, which are responsible for salience, fear processing, fear regulation, and executive control. So the dorsal DLPFC, which is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, in the blue area, is responsible for the executive control. It plays a role in cognitive control and emotional regulations, and helps regulate responses from the amygdala and support rational decision making under stress. The VLPFC, which is the ventral lateral prefrontal cortex, in the lower left blue area, it contributes to inhibitory control of emotions, and it has suppressed excessive emotional responses from amygdala. So when there's a response from the amygdala, so it helps in suppressing the excessive emotional behavior or responses. So the dorsal ACC and ventral ACC, so dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and ventral anterior cingulate cortex, and also hippocampus. So they are all part of the fear regulation. The dorsal ACC involved in cognitive process of emotions. The ventral ACC plays a role in emotional regulation and stress response. And hippocampus provided contextual memory to assess whether the stimulus is a true threat. This structure helps regulate fear responses and facilitate adaptation to emotional stressors. The amygdala and insula, which is the lower red, are salience and fear processing. These are the responsibilities of these areas. The amygdala process fear, threat detection, and emotional salience. The insula contribute to bodily awareness and emotional responses, like, for example, gut feeling or interoception from inside. These regions detect emotional relevance in stimuli and trigger autonomic and behavior responses. So the autonomic response, sympathetic and parasympathetic, and behavior response are triggered through these regions. The interaction between all these neural circuits is that DLPFC and VLPFC, dorsal and ventral, both of them exert top-down control over amygdala and insula, and helping to regulate the fear and emotional reactivity of a person. The ACC and hippocampus play a critical role in fear regulation, learning from past experiences, and providing context to emotional situations. The amygdala and insula process the immediacy and intensity of the emotional stimuli, particularly those related to threat and fear. So prefrontal cortex PFC and anterior cingulate cortex ACC helps regulate fear response by supporting emotional resilience. The amygdala and insula detect the signal emotional significance, particularly the fear-inducing situations. The hippocampus provides a memory context and influencing how fear is interpreted and regulated. The dysfunction of these networks is associated with anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, PTSD, and emotional dysregulation. The clinical application of these circuits is like that we can do cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, so which strengthens prefrontal cortex control over amygdala and improving fear regulation. So if the person goes to the CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, that to go into the exercises of the cognitive behavioral therapy give more control of the prefrontal cortex over amygdala, and that helps in more fear regulation. The exposure therapy helps the hippocampus and ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, to recontextualize fears, so that they're reducing the excessive emotional responses to these stimuli. The mindfulness and emotional regulation training target the DLPFC and VLPFC, dorsal lateral and ventral lateral, enhancing the self-control over fear-based reactions. So this diagrams provides an overview of the fear regulation circuit, emphasizing on the balance between emotional reactivity and the cognitive control in the brain. So the maladaptive neuroplasticity plays an important role in many diseases. It is the main cause of the symptoms in chronic neuropathic pain, also in spasticity and some form of tinnitus. It is contributing factors in many other diseases as well. So let's talk about the immune system and briefly. Emotion, because our emotion can affect the immune system, and they affect indirectly and directly the inflammatory process, and perhaps helps create more infection and may result in cancer in some patients. So what is the role of the immune system? So we have earlier we have emphasized on similarities between diseases where maladaptive neuroplasticity plays an important role, such as chronic neuropathic pain, severe tinnitus, and spasticity. This list has grown longer through recent research by multiple centers, and now including fibromyalgia and several other diseases as well. There are different factors which are implicating in the causes of the symptoms of these diseases have also grown. So all these factors which are affecting and causing these diseases have also grown, and now inducing BDNF in addition to the maladaptive plasticity. So BDNF is the brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is a crucial neurotropic protein that plays a vital role in neuronal growth, survival, and plasticity. It is one of the most studied neurotrophin, which is a family of proteins that promote development and function of the neurons. And the function of these BDNF is neurogenesis of the synaptic plasticity, which is promote the growth or survival of the neurons and enhances the synaptic plasticity which is crucial for learning and memory. It also plays in long-term potentiation (LPT), a mechanism which is a mechanism for the memory formation in the hippocampus. Also, the BDNF also affect the cognitive function of the memory. A high level of BDNF are associated with better memory and cognitive function. And BDNF is highly concentrated in the hippocampus, cerebral cortex, and basal forebrain. These are regions are involved in learning and higher cognitive processes. The emotional regulation of the mental health is also depending on BDNF. So BDNF is crucial for mood regulation and stress resilience. A low level of BDNF has been linked to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and schizophrenia. Antidepressant and physical exercise increases the BDNF expression, promoting brain health. The BDNF also protects neurons from apoptosis, which is the cell death, and oxidative stress. It supports the recovery from brain injuries and neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, Parkinson, and Huntington disease. The interaction with the hypothalamus HPA axis, the BDNF helps modulate the stress responses, which are regulating the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The chronic stress and high cholesterol level influence the BDNF expression, leading to brain atrophy and impaired cognitive function. So this is a favorable development in these factors can be affected by relative very simple means, and BDNF can be increased by physical exercises, as I said, and administration of more omega-3, intake of more omega-3. The ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 can easily be decreased by intake of more omega-3. So the immune system is a small, in the smallest sign, affect the function of many parts of the nervous system. So the hypothalamus, so when immune cells are secreted, they release cytokines, and cytokines act on the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus regulates back to the immune system through the vagus nerve, which is 10th cranial nerve. So the vagus nerve is acting, is controlling, is the nerve, the longest cranial nerve, which is controlling all the respiratory function, breathing, and other hormonal function, and all the hormone producing glands in the body, and increase the hypothalamus can increase CRH, which act on pituitary, and pituitary secretes ACTH, and ACTH affect on adrenal cortex, releasing hormone, and these adrenal cortex secrete cortisol, and the cortisol act on your immune system. So the function, so we are just going to look quickly on the functional anatomy of the inflammatory reflex. The neuronal interconnection between NTS, AP, DNA, and NA, and higher forebrain regions, so all these different regions integrate different afferent signaling and efferent vagus nerve mediated immunoregulatory system. So the afferent signal, they are going back up to the brain, and the efferent signal, they come back from the vagus and act on the immune deriving organs in the body. The afferent vagus nerve cholinergic output to the spleen, liver, and GIT, gastrointestinal tract, regulate immune activation and suppress pro-inflammatory cytokine release. So we can see the efferent vagus nerve output in the blue line, which is going to the heart, livers, celiac ganglion, intestines, liver, and the red dotted lines are the pathway through the vagus, which regulate immune activation and suppressing the post-inflammatory cytokine release. So this efferent cholinergic arm of the inflammatory reflex can be activated by brain through MCHR mediated mechanism, which is triggered and cause and some inhibitors, which are like galantamine. So ACHE is acetylcholine esterase, and an enzyme which act on different on acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is released at the end of the neuromuscular junction, and these are small vesicles. They are stored in small vesicles, and as when acetylcholine is released in this synaptic cleft between the neuron and the post-neuron synaptic receptors, they cause contraction, and all this acetylcholine is affecting on that. So microglia are the primary recipient of peripheral inflammatory signals as they reach the brain. Mood disorders, fibromyalgia, and the neuropathic pain may have shared systemic consequences. Stress, pain, and depression lead to excessive and untimely release of corticotropins. These corticotropin releasing hormones or CRH, and also adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone and glucocorticoids. That will have a direct effect of inflammation. So the immune system is controlled by or affected by these secretion of all these hormones. So amygdala in humans is effect of damage to, what is the effect of damage to the amygdala? So there are different studies done, and some of the studies like study by Kluver-Bucy syndrome is one of the syndrome. Dr. Heyman and co-worker in 1988 reported signs of damage to the amygdala in a patient with isolated symmetric damage to the amygdala and their cortical connection. So in 1998, the paper published by Dr. Heyman and his team, they identified damage to the part of the amygdala, and the connection of the amygdala to the cortical area were also affected. So, and this person presented with the psychic blindness, which is the inability to recognize the emotional importance of the event. So if some very important event or some stimuli or something happening that can affect you positively or negatively, and the person cannot identify that, that's referred to as psychic blindness. So it's not a physical blindness, but it's a psychic blindness. So you are not, you cannot identify the threat or reward for any reason. The hypersexuality often directed indiscriminately. So the KB syndrome will also result in hypersexuality in these patients. Altered emotional behavior, particularly placidity, and then also hyperorality and the ingestion of inappropriate organ. So putting everything in the mouth, that also activated. The tendency to react to every visual stimulus. So every visual stimulus, a person is responding to that, and also memory deficit. So these were the effect of damage to the amygdala, which were reported and published in 1988. So Dr. Adolph and his colleagues have interpreted the result from observation of patient with the patient who have amygdala damage, that the data showed that the bilateral but not unilateral damage to the amygdala impairs judgment of the intensity of the expression of the fear. So if there's a damage to the amygdala and it's a bilateral damage, not a unilateral damage, it will impair a person's ability to have a judgment of the intensity of a fear, and also the expression of normally judged to be very similar to fear, such as surprise. The data same investigation by Dr. Adolph and his team their data showed that the bilateral but not unit damage to the amygdala impaired the processing of some of the facial expression of the emotions, and recognition of the fear appears to be most severely impaired in these patients. So Dr. Doe summarized that here with the help of one such rare patient, we report finding that suggest the human amygdala is indispensable to recognize fear in facial expressions, recognize the multiple emotions in single facial expression. It is not required for recognizing personal identity from faces. These results suggest that damage restricted to the amygdala causes particular recognition impairment and thus forces the notion that the amygdala is involved in emotions. So that was the summary of their study. So that's the end of our part 3. Thank you.